We're here back in the fantasy bar talking some week 14, six of my favorite plays for you on FanDuel and DraftKings. We've got some value for you, a stack I really like that's not going to cost you a ton, a couple running backs I was surprised at the early ownership on, and of course, my favorite play on the entire slate in a dream spot. Who are we talking about? Only one way to find out. It's time to belly up to the fantasy bar. Welcome in, guys. Week 14 edition, Beers Daily Fantasy Six Pack. Still rolling on here from the Fantasy Bar. Six of my favorite plays for you on FanDuel and DraftKings for this week. Thank you, as always, stopping by the Fantasy Bar and checking out this week's video. Before we get to those plays, do me a favor. Take a second and hit that tip jar here in the Fantasy Bar, and that is simply clicking that thumbs up button. Let's see how many we can get on this week's video. Thank you very much for that in advance. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the content. All right, let's look back at week 13 and not going to sugarcoat it. Week 13 was definitely rough for us. Let's walk through the plays. Kenneth Walker just did not get it done. Charbonnet still too involved there. Greg Dortch, we were hoping Marvin Harrison Jr. was out. He was not, so that play did not work out. Justin Herbert gets injured during that game, unfortunately. Just was not the same. Ladd McConkey kind of salvaged his day with a late touchdown. Gunnar Helm, fine for his price, but no upside. And Travis Etienne, absolutely brutal as the beast of the week. So we're going to crumple up week 13, throw it in the trash, and we are going to move on to week 14. All right, let's get started at the running back position with Bucky Irving of Tampa Bay. So Irving returned last week. They talked about keeping him on a snap count. That just did not happen instantly. Reclaimed this backfield. Pretty much rendered White and Tucker as bench warmers for this game. So looking like he will be the lead back once again, to no surprise, but was a little surprised to see him thrust back in to such a big role. Now, does have a questionable tag here. Sounds like he's going to be good to go. And I don't think this role is going to change for Bucky Irving. Now, Tampa Bay, big home favorites here, so we love that for our running backs. Yes, Tucker and White could get some more work in this spot, but I think Irving does the majority of the damage here. And look at that early ownership, which can always change as we get till Sunday. Under 10% owned for Irving in this spot. So absolutely want to go to this in both tournaments and in your cash game. Think he's playable there as well. The Saints been so bad against opposing running backs. Fourth most rushing yards per game at over 110 per week. Bucky Irving looking like a smash this week at potentially low ownership on both FanDuel and DraftKings. All right, let's go to the other side of the game with some correlation at quarterback with Tyler Shuck. Now, this one not for everybody. Certainly understand some of these cheap quarterbacks come with a lot of risk, but does give us some correlation, does give us some savings, and there are lots of intriguing ways that we can stack Tyler Shuck here. We mentioned Tampa Bay, big 8.5-point favorite, so the Saints likely throwing this entire game as big underdogs here. And Shuck has been productive, 19 or more DraftKings points in 2 of the last 3 games. So at these prices, if we can push near 20 DraftKings points, we are certainly loving that, not to mention what it's going to open up for the rest of our lineup. And we know this Tampa Bay defense, a huge pass funnel, very good against the run, not good against the pass. Third most passing yards per game allowed to the quarterback position, giving up the second most DraftKings points per game. Great recipe here for Tyler Shuck to put some big numbers on the board as a big underdog in Tampa Bay. All right, let's stay right there and add a wide receiver for New Orleans. We're going to go with Devon Vele for some value. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of you out there were chasing last week. It has less to do with the numbers from last week and more to do with this guy emerging. They needed somebody as this wide receiver too. They went out and traded for him, and he has certainly stepped up here. Not to mention, you add these two up on DraftKings, we're talking about $8,300 for this stack. So that's going to give you a lot of room to play your favorite studs this week. Yes, Chris Olave, Juwan Johnson, certainly in play, and I don't mind doubles here with the Saints offense. As we mentioned, Vele, huge game last week. That's not what I'm focusing on. It's been the targets that I'm really after here. 15 over the last 2 weeks. So really playing a big role here and still a little bit too cheap for that role. We mentioned Tampa being a pass funnel, bottom 7 in receptions allowed, receiving yards allowed, and they're giving up the 11th most DraftKings points to the wide receiver position. Love this Saints stack to save some money this week against the Tampa Bay Bucks. All right, let's go to tight end next. We're going with Tyler Warren of Indianapolis. So tight end kind of tough this week. We have Trey McBride, who will definitely be in a lot of my lineups this week. I've said I don't care what he costs, what the ownership is. I'm going to be playing Trey McBride. Not many great standout spots outside of that at this position, but this one really jumped off the page for Tyler Warren. We're talking about a Jacksonville defense that's been good, but been awful against opposing tight ends. Bottom 5 in receptions allowed, receiving yards allowed, receiving touchdowns allowed, and fantasy points allowed to this position. So we get a lot of upside here with Tyler Warren, who I think will still be utilized in a lot of different ways. We didn't see a ton of it last week. We know Daniel Jones dealing with that leg injury has pretty much made him immobile. So I think Warren could get more work out of the backfield, maybe some goal line stuff, maybe some tush push stuff. There's just that additional upside that we get here with Tyler Warren on top of the matchup. Easily my favorite tight end at price for week 14. All right, let's go to wide receiver next with Christian Watson of Green Bay. So Watson really starting to come on as the main wide receiver here for this Green Bay team. We know it can be confusing. Yes, they may get some bodies back, but it's Watson's big play ability, the ability to go up, make a big catch in traffic, contested, and he's always been great around the red zone and the goal line. So that big GPP ceiling is what he offers us here. 8.5 targets per game over the past 2, 3 touchdowns over the past 3 weeks. And Chicago has struggled. Yes, Jalen Johnson is back. He is a great corner. He is not enough for me to avoid this matchup. 16 receiving touchdowns allowed by the Chicago Bears this season. 3rd most fantasy points allowed to this position as well. Huge game here in the NFC North. I think Watson steps up big time here, finds the end zone, and goes over 20 DraftKings points. All right, it's time. Take a look at my favorite play for week 14. Before we do that, let's give away another free month of RotoGrinders Premium in our Beast of the Week contest. Very easy to play. All you got to do, click the thumbs up button if you have not already, head to the comment section and guess fantasy points on DraftKings for my Beast of the Week. If your guess is the closest, easy as that. You know the drill. You're going to win a free month of RotoGrinders Premium simply for watching this week's video. All right, let's wrap it up with my favorite play for week 14. You know, Matt's the Beast of the Week. All right, Beast time. One more running back to go, and we are going with James Cook of Buffalo, this week's Beast of the Week. So again, looking at early ownership here, was absolutely surprised that his ownership is not double of what it is showing right now, and I expect this one to rise. I don't care. I want James Cook in a ton of my lineups. 20 or more DraftKings points now in 3 straight games. The passing role also growing, 14 targets, 14 receptions over the last 4 games. So they're really getting involved in more ways than just on the ground. And you can't draw up a better matchup than we get with the Cincinnati Bengals. Bottom 5 in almost every single category, and the worst in a lot of them. Rushing yards, most allowed on the season. Rushing touchdowns, bottom 5. Receptions and receiving yards, which we just talked about, they are bottom 5 there as well. Receiving touchdowns, they've allowed the most to running backs, and they've also allowed the most fantasy points to this position. No surprise, and not just the most, 3.5 more per game than the next worst team. You can't draw up a better spot here. James Cook, easily my favorite play on the board in this week's Beast of the Week. All right, guys, that'll do it for our Week 14 six-pack. As always, any comments, questions, feedback, you know where to find me. Hit me up in that YouTube comment section or on Twitter at Beermakersfan and get your guess in. How many DraftKings points for James Cook this week? First shot to win a free month of RotoGrinders Premium. For RotoGrinders.com, I am Beer saying salut, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Best of luck here in Week 14, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for checking out our videos. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more DraftKings, FanDuel, and other DFS content. And you can check out our daily live show schedule on RotoGrinders.com/videos.